The rain had a way of making the Jensen house look smaller. Not that it was ever grand, just an old brick building with ivy clinging to the sides and windows that never seemed quite clean. But that night, as Emily Jensen stepped out of the cab, it looked older. Like it had been waiting for her. She clutched her coat tighter. It was supposed to be a simple visit, attend her late Uncle Richard's memorial, sign some paperwork, and be back in Chicago by Monday. But the will had changed everything. In the lawyer's office that afternoon, she'd been handed a small velvet pouch. Inside, a brass key. From Richard, the lawyer had said, his eyes unreadable. He said you'd know what to do with it. She didn't. But she knew where it belonged. The Jensen family's safe deposit box hadn't been opened in over 20 years. Richard was the only one with access, and now, apparently, she was too. Inside the house, the air smelled faintly of dust and old wood. Emily set her suitcase down, the echo of her footsteps swallowed by the silence. Everything was exactly where she remembered it, the grandfather clock in the hall, the crooked painting of Lake Michigan, the faint creak in the third stair. She poured herself a glass of water, her mind replaying the moment she'd seen her name in the will. She had expected maybe a book, or a family trinket. But a key? To something locked away for decades? That was different. She didn't notice the shadow outside the window. Not yet. Upstairs, she unpacked slowly, telling herself she was only tired. But as she pulled back the curtains, she caught movement in the driveway, a figure, just far enough away to be unrecognizable. And then it was gone. Emily's phone buzzed. No caller ID. She hesitated before answering. A low voice, almost a whisper. Don't open it. The line went dead. She stood there, phone in hand, heart pounding. The key felt heavier now. And for the first time since Richard's death, Emily wondered if maybe, just maybe, she didn't want to know what was in that safe. The next morning, the storm had passed, but the air still smelled like wet earth. Emily barely slept. The phone call kept replaying in her mind, that low voice, almost urgent. Don't open it. She'd tried to convince herself it was a prank. But who even knew about the key? The bank was only a 15-minute walk from the Jensen house. She left early, hoping the fresh air would settle her nerves. The streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you notice every footstep behind you. Twice, she turned around. Nobody there. The bank clerk, a woman in her 60s with a polite but tired smile, led her down to the vault. The metal door loomed ahead, thick enough to survive an earthquake. The brass key slid into the lock with surprising ease. The clerk stepped back as Emily pulled the heavy drawer forward. Inside, a small wooden box sat on a faded blue cloth. She hesitated, fingertips hovering over the lid. When she finally lifted it, she didn't see gold or jewelry. Just papers. Dozens of envelopes, each marked with dates, some going back to the 1970s. On top was a single photograph. A man and a woman, standing in front of a boat. The man wasn't Uncle Richard. And the woman. Emily froze. The woman looked exactly like her mother. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the first letter. It was written in neat, deliberate handwriting. If you're reading this, it means Richard is gone. And you're old enough to understand what he did. Your name is not Jensen. Neither is mine. Before she could read further, the clerk's voice cut in. Ma'am. There's someone here asking for you. Emily turned to see a tall man in a dark coat waiting at the end of the hallway. His face was unreadable, but his eyes locked on hers like he already knew everything about her. And that's when she realized, he was holding an identical brass key. The man didn't move. He just stood at the far end of the narrow corridor, his presence pressing against the walls like a weight. Emily swallowed hard. Can I help you? He stepped closer, each footstep echoing off the vault's stone floor. You shouldn't have opened it. It was the same voice from the phone call. Her mind flashed back to last night, the shadow in the driveway. The warning. "What do you want?" she asked, trying to sound steady. His eyes darted toward the open deposit box. "It doesn't belong to you. Give it to me, and we can both walk away." Emily's grip on the wooden box tightened. "No." Something flickered across his face, frustration. Or fear. "Then you've made the wrong choice," he said, turning and walking away without another word. The clerk looked uneasy. "Do you know him?" Emily shook her head, though she wasn't sure if that was entirely true. There was something about him, a faint familiarity she couldn't place. She hurried out of the bank and back into the cold air, clutching the box under her coat. Every step home felt watched. Once inside, she locked the door, dropped the box on the kitchen table, and started pulling out more envelopes. Most were addressed to someone named Margaret Hensley. The date spanned decades. Halfway through the stack, she found a small notebook bound in cracked leather. Inside were sketches, maps of the Great Lakes, harbor markings, coordinates. One page had a name scrawled over and over, the Marlowe. The sound of tires crunching on gravel outside made her freeze. She peeked through the blinds. A black sedan was parked in the driveway. The stranger was back, and this time, he wasn't alone. Emily's first thought was to call the police, but what would she even say? "Two men are in my driveway because I found some letters." The sedan's engine cut off. The stranger stepped out on the driver's side, his coat fluttering in the wind. The second man was broader, shaved head, hands in his pockets like they were hiding something heavy. Emily grabbed the wooden box, shoved it into a canvas tote, and slipped toward the back door. She'd barely touched the knob when the front lock rattled. Someone was trying a key. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She darted into the laundry room, yanked open the door to the backyard, and slipped out, crouching low as she ran along the side of the house. From inside came the muffled sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate. She didn't stop until she reached the edge of the woods behind the property. From there, she could see through the kitchen window. The shaved-head man was rifling through drawers while the stranger stood by the table, running his hand over the empty blue cloth where the box had been. Then, as if sensing her, he turned and looked directly toward the trees. Straight at her. Emily backed away, clutching the tote. She needed answers, and there was only one place to start, the name in the letters, Margaret Hensley. The problem was, she hadn't seen her in 20 years. And the last Emily had heard, Margaret had vanished without a trace. By nightfall, Emily was in her car, the tote bag hidden beneath a blanket on the passenger seat. She drove an hour west, following an address she'd found scribbled on the last page of the notebook. The house was a weathered Victorian, its porch sagging under the weight of time. She hesitated, then knocked. An elderly woman opened the door just far enough to peer out. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, swept over Emily. "You look like her," the woman said. "Like who?" Emily asked. Without answering, the woman unlatched the chain and let her in. The living room smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. On the mantel sat a row of framed photographs. In the center, a black and white image of a young woman standing on a pier, wind in her hair. "That's Margaret," the woman said. "Your mother's sister." Emily's breath caught. "My aunt?" The woman nodded slowly. "She disappeared in 1999, just after the accident. People said she drowned. I never believed that." Emily placed the wooden box on the coffee table. This was in a safe deposit box. "My father, or the man I thought was my father, left me the key." The woman's hands trembled as she opened the box. She flipped through the letters, then stopped at the map with the Marlowe scrawled across it. Her face drained of color. "They're looking for the gold." Emily frowned. "What gold?" "The Marlowe was a freighter that sank in '57. It was carrying more than steel. Margaret found out where. And now, so have you. Before Emily could respond, headlights swept across the front windows. The sound of car doors slamming followed. The woman grabbed Emily's arm. If they find you here, neither of us will leave alive. The woman, whose name Emily now knew was Ruth, didn't waste time. She shoved the letters back into the box, snapped it shut, and pressed it into Emily's hands. Through the back door. Don't stop. Don't talk. Emily ran, Ruth hobbling behind her with surprising speed. They slipped out into the backyard just as voices echoed from the front porch. A flashlight beam cut through the dark. Emily ducked behind a rusting shed, heart pounding so loud she swore it could be heard across the yard. Two men's silhouettes passed by the kitchen window. One of them was the shaved-head man from before. He was speaking into a phone. She's here. Somewhere. Ruth pushed Emily toward the tree line. They wove through the underbrush until they reached a narrow trail. My car's in the old barn up ahead, Ruth whispered. But before they could take another step, the crunch of footsteps on leaves came from behind. A third man emerged from the shadows, blocking the path. His hand rested casually on the handle of a gun tucked into his waistband. Ladies, he said, his voice calm but deadly. Let's make this easy. Emily's grip on the tote tightened. She thought of the gold, the letters, the map, and the look in the stranger's eyes earlier that day. She took a step back, her mind racing. The trail behind them was too narrow to run, the man ahead too close. Then Ruth did something Emily didn't expect. She pulled a flare gun from her coat pocket and fired straight into the night sky. The burst of red light blinded the man for a second. Ruth grabbed Emily's wrist. Run! They tore down the trail, branches clawing at their clothes, the shouts of the men growing fainter behind them. When they finally reached the barn, Ruth yanked open the doors to reveal a dusty old pickup. They climbed in, and the engine roared to life. As the headlights lit the dirt road ahead, Ruth said, almost to herself. We've got one night to find the Marlowe, before they find us. The barn was miles behind them now, the moon a pale ghost above the highway. Ruth's hands gripped the wheel like she could steer them out of fate itself. Emily unfolded the map, tracing the inked lines that led to a jagged mark on the coast. That's where the Marlowe went down, Ruth said. And if Margaret was right, the gold's still there. By dawn, they reached the cliffs. The ocean below was restless, waves slamming the rocks as if guarding the secret. At the base of the cliff was a rusted shack. Inside, among fishing nets and rotting crates, Emily found a waterproof chest wedged beneath a workbench. She knelt, prying it open. Stacks of gold bars glimmered in the dim light. But beneath them was something stranger, a sealed envelope addressed in her mother's handwriting. Her hands shook as she tore it open. Emily, if you're reading this, then you know the truth. I had to disappear to protect you. The gold isn't ours, it belongs to men who would kill to reclaim it. Take it far from here. And trust Ruth. She kept me alive once, she'll keep you alive now. Before Emily could process the words, a shadow filled the doorway. The shaved-head man stepped in, gun raised. End of the road. Ruth moved in front of Emily, but the man only smiled. I don't need you. I need her. Emily's mind raced. Then she remembered the flare gun in Ruth's coat, and the unstable fuel canisters stacked near the wall. Without a word, Emily snatched the flare gun, fired at the canisters, and pulled Ruth toward the back door. The explosion tore through the shack, the roar swallowed by the sea. When they reached the truck, the shack was a heap of twisted metal and smoke. The gold was gone, scattered into the ocean, lost forever. Ruth glanced at Emily. You could have been rich. Emily looked back at the burning wreckage. I'd rather be alive. They drove off, the morning sun breaking over the horizon. Somewhere, Emily knew, her mother was still out there, and the past wasn't done with her yet.